I've been taking a break from hunting recently to investigate the lore Hunt Showdown has to offer. My curiosity was caused by the lore Q&A the developers held on Discord a week ago, and especially one question stick to my mind. Did they find everything on Lawson Delta yet? I saw this as a clear motivation, so I set out to discover some of the hidden lore of the map, and as it turns out, I found lots of stuff. I found the DeLorean under a blanket and another Back to the Future reference at Arden Parish. I even found the Titanic in one specific corner. In short, I traveled across the whole map trying to stay undercover from the murdery eyes of my fellow hunters, but the lore seemed to elude me. I didn't even know what to look for. A pair of glasses maybe? A strange looking body perhaps? It may be a location. But then, as I investigated Fort Carmack, I found something. Some very minute detail which can be overlooked quite easily as it is found in the boss lair of the building. Of course, what better place to hide something like that than in a room you wouldn't enter unless you had a clear objective. But I found it. It was a series of letters pinned to the sideboard of one of the beds, and I was sure the text was readable. But it was too small and dark to read, so I came back with the scope and a flashlight, and indeed, these letters tell a story. It was very hard to decipher these because the fonts vary, there's spelling errors everywhere and so on. So forgive me if one or two words don't make immediate sense. What follows is a series of letters, in assumed chronological order, written by Augusta, the wife of a soldier named Walter, who was apparently stationed at Fort Carmack during the Civil War era. Letter 1. Dear Walter, though grateful I certainly am for you through this horrible war, I want to admit that still I was stricken with unease. I feared reading the newspaper, but now rejoice, for it seems that things are coming to an end. Which brings me, of course, to our circumstance. Have you any word on when your posting will be over, when you will return home to me, forever? Please don't be uncertain of my disposition toward you, for it is true and loving as ever. I trust in God to keep you safe, as you trust in Him for me. Yours, Augusta. Letter 2. Dear Walter, speaking to Mary and Sella this morning, they couldn't but mention the delight they had for their husband's return. Rather than be indignant or ungrateful, I thought to remind you that I write to you with a longing heart and will still eagerly but patiently look forward to the day you return home. I understand that you cannot just pack up and go, and I'm proud of you for still serving our again united nation. Love, Augusta. Letter 3. Dear Walter, being all dressed up for Sunday, having finished dinner, I would talk to you now on paper as I cannot otherwise. The day was beautiful and the little ones did look so pretty this morning. I wish you could have seen them. I hope soon you will, for today was 3 years since the end of the war and the day when you said you would be back for certain. Love, Augusta. Now, just a quick reminder before we go on, these letters, they have no date. So all we have is 3 years since the war is over. Please keep that in mind. Letter 4. Dear Walter, I long and long but with no respite. They are monumentally cherished, those few weeks of leave you've got last year. Can you not plead with your officers for a discharge? We are beyond the need for such a garrisoned fort after so long. Yours, Augusta. Let's have a quick stop here. There is a lot of stuff that is, well, ordinary for someone who misses her husband, but the curious thing is that Walter stayed behind even though the war was over and didn't get as much leave as his fellow soldiers did. This happened either by his own accord or because his superior officers didn't want to let him go. Unfortunately, I don't know any details about military life in the 1900s to make a guess, so I will leave that up to someone who knows more of this era than I do. And the last letter makes things even more dubious, because this last one isn't from his wife, but from an unknown person. Dear Walter, I hope these lines find you in good health. Your proposal is bold, but the stakes bolder. I will gladly assist in any way I can. The letter to your wife can easily be forged. I will arrange. The keyword in that letter is forged, as in, yes, I will forge a document for you. What kind of document? I don't know. I looked around for more clues and I couldn't find anything else, so I had to make my own assumptions. At best, Walter had to smuggle a letter out to his wife and needed someone to write it for him because he was illiterate, it could be. But at worst, he faked his death to be freed from his wife and do other things. The reason why I say this is because there's one last piece of paper next to all the letters and it shows a detailed drawing of a hellhound. So no matter how the story ends, Walter saw something out there, something he wasn't supposed to see. Maybe that's why his superiors didn't let him leave, maybe that's why he stayed in the fort by himself, or maybe, just maybe, he became a hunter. Remember, this was around the era of the Civil War, and according to official sources, the fort got decommissioned in 1885, which was 5 years prior to the events of Hunt Showdown. This means, however, that the Louisiana incident in 1890 was not the first occurrence of the blight or curse or whatever it is that turns humans into abominations. And sadly, this is it. Walter's story ends here, and it left me with more questions than answers. How is he connected to this occurrence of the dark powers which haunt the world, and what exactly happened to him? But at least now I knew what to look for. There had to be other letters on the map, so I systematically searched every location for written text, and indeed, I found more letters strewn across Fort Carmack and the Maw Battery. Some of them can even be found in both locations, but since the game is still not at version 1.0, I think they're going to patch that out sooner or later. Anyway, to sum it up, I found 4 more stories at these 2 locations, but apart from 1 more correspondence, the other letters seem to be just ordinary war stories. I will start with the one that may have a connection to the lore, albeit a weak one, and then, for completion's sake, I will read the rest of the letters. The first story I discovered can only be found in the Maw Battery, and yes, you need a spyglass again to actually read it. The letters are about a guy named Daniel C. Captain, who seemed to have died in 1862, but makes another appearance 32 years later. Let me read the letter first. Lawson, Louisiana, September 1862. To the father of Daniel Captain. My dear sir, I regret to inform you of the untimely loss of your son, Daniel Captain, on August 29th. Though you do not know me, I inform you of this horrible loss news, for I cannot ascertain what has become of your wife and other children. Then there's something I can barely read. I was in the habit of coming in the... sorry, unreadable word, and sitting by Daniel and soothing. Then the letter ends. And then there's a letter of interment next to it, but the date isn't 1862, it's 1894, and it's written by a company called Sexton and Undertaker. There are some items listed that are pretty usual for a funeral: a coffin, candles, etc. Everything together costs nearly $40. Now we need to address something here. The only way I can explain a dead person showing up 30 years later is by admitting that there was a mistake. Maybe they meant untimely loss literally, like, hey, we lost your son and can't find him anymore. But here's another possibility. It could also be that he was taken away by the government, military or whatever because he was one of the first infected people and somebody wanted him locked up. That would explain why his name shows up 30 years later on an official document. But even this is only possible when I make a lot of assumptions because there are so many details missing. And I don't think that I need to say that I didn't find anything more on the matter. Now the rest of the letters I found don't seem to have any links to the Hunt Showdown lore and seem to focus more on the Civil War, but I will let you decide. Let's start with a guy called Alistair, who seems to be a right bastard, but see for yourself. Alistair, the debtor was here for you. I understand now, you are a coward. Beyond my wildest imagining, such a coward. Nothing back here you wanted to return to, and now you're saddled us with debt. Debt that you hid from us. I hope you burn in hell. I don't know who wrote this letter, but he or she must be extremely angry. But wait, there's more. Dear Alistair, it has been many months. Why won't you write me? I don't care what happened. I'm ready to forget and forgive. Anthony asks for you often. Please come home. Please write. Don't turn your back on us. With love, Christine. And then there are also $10 pinned to the wall, which is a lot of money for that time. Anyway, the only possible connection I can find here is that Alistair may have become a hunter and needed the money for the equipment, but even that is a big stretch. Also, I think Alistair is dead since he didn't use the $10 his girlfriend sent him with the second letter. Maybe I'll find more in the future, but for now, Alistair's trail ends here. Let's move on to another story. This one revolves around a son who died, and the recipient is the father who apparently was stationed here. This letter, by the way, it's written like the guy had a claw for a hand or a hook. I don't know. But it took me 2 days to decipher his handwriting. Also, this doesn't seem to be the whole letter, just the end of it. I can make out a name at the end and we start mid-sentence. liked to have me, liked to put his arm out and lay his hand in mine. Toward the last he was restless, but he passed in peace. I thought perhaps a few words about your son from one who was with him at the last might be worthwhile, though from a stranger. In the hope that it may be no intrusion upon the sacredness of your sorrow, I have ventured to address you this tribute to the memory of my young friend and your brave and early so fallen child. In utmost respect, M. Tramped or Trumped, I am absolutely not sure what the name is. The second letter is way more readable and it's from the wife, actually. Husband, I do not know how I shall survive. Both our sons fallen and you away. Would that we could see each other again on God's earth, though I should not fear to see you first again in his heavenly realms. It is simply that, and then the letter ends, but it's clear to see that the wife is in mourning and will probably do something bad. I mean, who could blame her? She lost 2 sons. This is just a depressing story. All that is left is one more, and this one is just a formal notice that the son has died. Dear sir, God has called your son William just to the other shore. He died herciently, which can be roughly translated to in peace, and will not be forgotten. As is customary, he was buried. And then the letter ends again. After this, I stumbled across another set of letters which basically revolve around a son telling his father that he, just like his dad, became a soldier, and a mother who pleads with her husband to send the child back home. And at first I thought that these 2 stories are linked and that I found the beginning of a bigger story, since the letters could be talking about the same son. Maybe it's always the same son and that son is Daniel. But then I checked the handwriting and it turns out to be 2 mothers talking about different sons, since the handwriting is so wildly different. Which means I was at a dead end again. And sadly, that is all I found so far. If you found anything that I missed, let me know down in the comments. Also, it would be cool to hear about your theories. I really want to know what happened to Walter, Alistair, and Daniel. And since that's all for now, I'll go back to playing the game like a normal hunter again. As for you, thank you for watching, and I hope we'll meet in the next video. See ya!